The story is titled The Landlord Who Gave Tenants Free Rent for a Year. A story of kindness, crisis, and the unexpected cost of compassion. The Man on Garsden Street. Garsden Street was a kind of place where people rarely moved out of and rarely moved into. Nestled in the older part of town, the houses were modest, built with red bricks and roofed with stubborn tiles that had withered decades of sun, rain, and sorrow. At the end of the street stood a three-story apartment building, brown with age, with paint that peeled like burnt skin, the kind of building people walked past without really seeing, but inside it lived stories. 10 families, each tucked into their own small, hard-earned space. The building had a soul, and its soul was shaped in large part by the man who owned it, Mr. Oluwaseun Ajayi. At 64, Mr. Ajayi was no one's idea of a modern-day hero. He wore the same brown cap every day, carried a thermos of tea no matter the weather, and walked with a quiet limp from a road accident in 1991, but he watched over his tenants like a father might his adult children, sternly but with a heart full of goodwill. Before the crisis, Mr. Jai wasn't born wealthy. In fact, he often joked that he didn't taste chicken until he turned 18. And even then, it was chicken bone soup. He grew up in the village of Ikperu Remo, where he learned how to mix concrete with his bare hands and walked 6 kilometers to school with no shoes. He migrated to Lagos in the early 80s, where he worked as a bricklayer, then a site manager, and eventually, by sheer grit and frugality, bought his first plot of land. That small plot became 3 flats, then another compound, and finally Garden Street Apartments, his most valuable property. His policy was simple: keep rent affordable, maintain the place with dignity, and never raise prices arbitrarily. His tenants included single mothers, junior school teachers, keke riders, a retired seamstress, and a newly married couple just finding their feet. To them, he was Baba Landlord, the man who dropped by once a month not just to collect rent, but to ask if the water pump was working or if anyone had power issues. He brought Gary during fuel shortages. He helped patch leaking roofs during the rainy season. But least of no one, least of Mr. Ajayi, was ready for what would come in 2020, the shutdown. When the lockdown was announced, it was like a heavy sheet of metal fell on the city. Markets closed, churches stopped ringing their bells, schools shut their gates, and for many of Mr. Ajayi's tenants, daily income dried up like rain in Harmattan. Ada, a caterer and a single mother of two, lost all her wedding and party contracts. Musa, the tricycle driver, was grounded by movement restriction. Even Nkechi, the primary school teacher, hadn't been paid in 2 months. Rent was due in 2 weeks. Some began to sell possessions, others stopped cooking 3 meals a day. A few stayed up deep into the night, whispering fears they couldn't voice in daylight. That's when a handwritten note appeared on the tenant's door. Dear tenant, I understand these are hard times. Do not worry about paying rent for now. You are all my responsibilities. Mr. Ajayi. 1 year free. When the news spread that Mr. Ajayi had suspended rent for the whole building, not for 1 month, not for two, but an entire year, shock turned into tears. Real, uncontrollable tears. Shock turned into tears. Real, uncontrollable tears. Ada cried on her front steps. Musa stood still, staring at the note in disbelief. Nkechi called her mother just to say, some good people still exist. The gesture was more than financial relief. It was proof that someone still cared in a world that seemed to be collapsing. It gave them breathing room, a kind of hope they didn't know they needed. But kindness has a cost, and over the months, that cost began to show. The cost of kindness. 2 months into the rent suspension, Mr. Jai's phone rang with increasing frequency, not from tenants, but from his relatives. His younger brother Tayo was the first to call. Shegun, I heard you've turned your property into a charity home. Have you lost your mind? Then came his daughter Bimbo, who lived in Canada. Daddy, I know you have a good heart, but what about your retirement? Your medication? Do you expect these tenants to take care of you when you are old? Even his lawyer warned him cautiously. Tenants are not always grateful. Be careful what lines you cross. But Mr. Jai was unmoved. I built this place with my hands. If my tenants can't sleep well in it during the hardest season of their lives, then what did I really build? He sold 2 parcels of land he had intended to pass down to his children. He cashed out some of his savings, money he had stashed for a possible new surgery. He cut back on his diet, began working more to save fuel, and quietly stopped sending monthly stipends to a few distant relatives. But to the tenants, nothing changed. He still greeted them with a smile, still checked on the plumbing, still sat on the bench under the mango tree every Sunday. Transformation. As the months passed, something changed within the apartment compound, not just physically, but emotionally. Ada started baking from home, and before long, neighbors were ordering small chops. With the money she saved from rent, she bought a second-hand oven and made a little signboard. Ada's kitchen, home bites. Nkechi turned her flat into a mini classroom since schools were still struggling with online learning. Neighborhood parents paid her to teach their kids in small, safe groups. Her flat echoed with ABC songs and multiplication tables. Every Sunday evening, the compound gathered outside. They cooked, shared laughter, played old music on someone's Bluetooth speaker, and danced. And at the center of it all, Mr. Jai sat quietly, smiling, watching life unfold. Whispers in the dark. But paradise is never without shadows. As the months wore on, sentiment began to simmer, not among the tenants, but among outsiders. People from nearby buildings began gossiping. So because he gave them free rent, they now feel they are better than the rest of us. It's not kindness, Jare. Maybe he's dying and trying to buy heaven. There were whispers that Mr. Jai must have gotten COVID money or had a political agenda. Some even said he was hiding something that no man gives without expecting something in return. One day, someone spray painted Baba Mumu in red on the compound wall. No one saw who did it. It was cleaned by morning, but the message lingered. Even inside the compound, a strange shift began to take place. One of the tenants, Mr. Durajayi, a pensioner with a sharp tongue, began asking bold questions. Will this free rent thing continue next year? Or is he just fattening us for disappointment? He called a quiet meeting with 3 others, suggesting they demand a free rent extension, since it's the least the old man could do after so much sacrifice. Mr. Jai heard about it, not from any tenants, but from the gate boy who overheard the whispers. That night, he didn't sleep. He simply sat on the balcony, wrapped in a faded shawl, listening to the distant sounds of Lagos traffic, wondering if he had made a mistake. The betrayal. It happened in October, after nearly a year of no rent, and with economic pressure mounting. Mr. Jai quietly drafted a notice, not to ask for full payment, but to let tenants know that from January, rent will resume at the previous rates. With the first month at 50% discount, he slid a copy under each door himself, accompanied by a short letter. My children, I am proud of how each of you have endured this season. I ask that we return to our regular arrangements in the new year. I will still be here for you, always, Mr. Ajayi. Most tenants understood. Many even began saving up in advance, but not all. Mr. Durajayi, the retired railway clerk, was furious. So this was a gimmick, Abi, just a temporary stunt, so he could go back to collecting money from poor people. He led 3 other tenants, 2 of whom had not paid rent in almost 16 months. down to the local tenants union office. They filed a petition claiming that Mr. Ajayi had made a verbal promise that rent would be permanently scrapped as long as the pandemic effects lingered. The petition alleged manipulation, psychological pressure, and even claimed spiritual coercion through emotional dependency. When Mr. Ajayi received a letter from the local council, his hands trembled. "I give my heart," he whispered, "and they used it as a leverage when the body fails." By December, Mr. Ajayi stopped coming out every Sunday. His limp worsened, his appetite dwindled, the tea thermos remained untouched on the kitchen counter. Ada knocked, then knocked again by the next day. When he didn't answer by the third day, Musa broke the door. They found him sitting in his chair, conscious but pale and cold. He had suffered a minor stroke. At the hospital, the doctor said it wasn't just age, it was stress, weight loss, and untreated hypertension. "He's been running on generosity," the doctor muttered. "But a man can't live on giving alone." The tenants were crushed, all of them, except Mr. Ajayi. They took turns staying at the hospital. Nkechi read to him from Psalms. Ada brought him hot yam porridge. Musa bathed and shaved him. The same man who once carried them all through crisis now lay helpless, quietly smiling at the faces that surrounded him. He whispered to Ada one evening, "I used to think I was building house, but I think I was building people." A compound in mourning. On February 17, 2022, Mr. Oluwaseun Ajayi passed away. There was no grounding, no sirens, just the quiet stillness of an old man exhaling for the last time. His body was returned to his hometown, Iperu, where he was buried beside his late wife. But on Garsden Street, the morning was unlike anything the neighborhood had ever seen. The tenant dressed in white and black. They painted a banner. "Here lived a man who built more than a house. He built people." Children drew chalk hearts on the wall. Neighbors from other compounds brought chairs and joined the wake. Even people who once criticized him came to say he was different. The biggest surprise came the following week when his lawyer read his will in front of the tenants. Mr. Ajayi has done something most landlords would never do. According to the will, each tenant who had lived in the building during the pandemic would be allowed to stay rent-free for the next 2 years. After that, ownership of their individual units will be offered to them at 20% of market price. He has set up a trust using part of the proceeds from his earlier land sales to maintain the property for the next 3 years. His daughter Bimbo wept when he learned this because despite her earlier protests, she now saw the heart behind his sacrifice. But the tenants didn't wait for 2 years to honor him. Musa and Ada organized a community pantry outside the building, offering free food items every Saturday to street kids. Nkechi started an afternoon literacy club in Mr. Ajayi's name. The compound was repainted. Each door was numbered in gold, and on the main entrance, a metal plaque was mounted with a face engraved in bronze. The Ajayi building, where kindness was a way of life. Legacy in brick and blood. Years later, the story of Garsden Street still echoed in whispers and retellings. News blogs covered it. A short documentary was made. University professors used it in their urban development lecture as an example of ethical housing. But to those who lived there, it was never about fame. It was about one man who saw people before property, one man who sacrificed silently, who gave not because he had excess, but because he knew the true worth of empathy.